I want to make it very clear that I'm not making today's video to put my opponent on blast. I'm not calling him out or anything along those lines. I'm making today's video and I'm going very in depth with what happened in the match that I played at, the last match that I played at the regional qualifier that was this past weekend. And I'm making this video and I'm going in depth to protect you guys from having the same thing happen to you. I'd also like to say that this is not a personal attack on my opponent. I'm sure that he is perfectly fine outside of Yu-Gi-Oh! And even throughout most of our match, he wasn't very negative towards me. It's just overall, especially in Game 3, there was a huge issue that, while I don't think he was doing it necessarily intentionally, it definitely affected the outcome of the match in a very negative and unfair way. I don't hold this match against my opponent. I don't know him really, and we're not friends. We only met that one time, and while that one time was very negative, I don't think he's an awful person for how this match turned out. I think in some ways this was both of our faults, me not realizing that I should call a judge, him maybe playing slower than I would have liked, but him not realizing that he might be affecting the match in a very negative way. If in fact it was intentional slow play, well then that's a different story, but I think in general it probably was unintentional slow playing, which still happened to affect the match in a pretty big way. And it just sucks because I really want to have positive Yu-Gi-Oh! Experiences. When I play against people at regionals or YCSs, even though someone has to win and someone has to lose, I want to have a fun, interesting, skillful match, and I want both players to come away from that match and say, you know what, one of us had to win, one of us had to lose, but at least we had a good time and we can still remain friends afterwards. Maybe we can give each other tips after the match or something like that. That happens most of the time, and one of the reasons that this sucks so much is that I don't know how he feels about me. He probably doesn't like me very much right now, and I know that I don't hold any of this against him, but I do know that both of us came away from that match with a very, very negative experience, which just really sucks because in general, Yu-Gi-Oh! Is a fun game that you can meet new people playing against, and it just really stinks when it ends up happening like this. And I don't know about him, but if I could go back and still lose the match, but redo the match entirely to where there wasn't this issue at the end, I definitely would, just to make sure we both went away with a more positive experience. I talked with multiple judges after the match, and they gave me tons of great advice. I really have to give a huge shout out to the judges at the Rosemont Regional. They were so helpful in telling me what I could have done and what I should have done to better help me in this situation. I don't want to spend too much of this video talking about Game 1 because it's not very important, but it is worth mentioning that there was a huge ruling disagreement in Game 1. Basically what happened is that I felt that I used infinite impermanence in the middle column, and then he activated a card in that middle column. He argued that it wasn't in that column and he put it one over, and there was a bunch of issues because he put the card in the graveyard and then put it back on the field in a different spot. We called the judge over and the judge basically helped us out, but also he kind of told us not to escalate the situation any further. He said that it's really hard sort of determining where the infinite impermanence was actually negating stuff because we didn't have proof of where the card was. I didn't escalate it, and in hindsight, especially after talking to some of the other judges at that regional, I should have escalated it to like a head judge or something along those lines and actually sit down and talk about where I felt the card was activated and where he activated his card. I think it would have went in my favor because I know that I was right. Then what happened is that he won that game and then I won Game 2, and what was funny about winning in Game 2 is that my opponent was very clearly confused. He thought that there wasn't another game in the match. Now I'm not a scummy player, so I didn't just have him sign the match slip and give me the win even though we only played 2 games. So what happened is while he was sort of going on this tangent, and he even told me like, here's what I side decked and I can't believe that I lost that game, so on and so forth. I just kept side decking like we were going into Game 3. Eventually he figured it out, probably when I wasn't picking up my cards, and he was like, oh wait, we have to play another game, to which I said yes. And there was probably about 2 minutes there that we lost because he thought the match was over. That might not seem that relevant, and it probably wouldn't be that relevant because we had, I don't know, 7 or 6 minutes left in the match at that point once he realized that he still had the side deck. However, once we started the next game, the last game in the match, I slowly realized we actually really would need those 2 minutes and there was no getting them back. And that brings us to Game 3, where probably the worst game that I played in Yu-Gi-Oh! If not, I mean, it makes it the worst match because of how bad the situation went for me, and that's what I'm going to show on the screen right now because I feel it's really important. It's more of a visual thing, not just like telling you about infinite permanence. There's a lot of moving parts to this equation. I feel it's crucial to actually have you guys see every single card that was being activated and played in the correct order so you can understand where I'm coming from. Okay, so I won't go through his entire combo that he did, and also shout out to Nim for helping me set this up, but basically here was his ending board. Now at this time he has a Rusty, he has the Link 2 monster for Orcus, he has the Orcus field spell, and he has a Skeleton and Dingirsu in the graveyard. At this time I know 2 of his back rows. I know 2 of them are Fog Blades. I do not know the third one. He had done the full combo here pretty much for the most part, so I know all of his cards except for one mystery face down. When it gets to my turn, I mean, he has taken about 4 to 5 minutes to his combo, which is perfectly fine. I don't think he was slow playing during that 4 to 5 minutes, but it's about 1 minute and 15 seconds for me to break this board. But I don't have to break the board, I just have to do enough damage. I have to get to the battle phase, and more importantly, I have to push through the Fog Blades and push through what I think is a face down Orcus Crescendo, but you can see here it's not going to be a Crescendo, it's going to be a different card entirely. So if we go through the plays that I make here, you can see I Twin Twister, targeting 2 of his face downs, and this is what I think he's going to Crescendo, which isn't going to matter too much because I have a Gazelle in hand, I can just continue my play. But in fact, he does not have Crescendo, he has Imperial Order. Now, some people might say, well, what if right here you just pass turn and then kill them with the Order? The problem with doing that is that because I don't have a board, if I pass turn and he takes that 700, he can simply just attack for way more than 700. He'll draw and then it's declare battle phase. Even throughout this combo, and we'll get to the very moment when I knew that I was going to get stalled for time at that end, you can see that even if I said, okay, pass turn, just whatever, I'm not resolving my effect entirely, so we can't actually skip past it, and more importantly, he once again can just draw a card, say battle phase, and just kill me. So that really wasn't an option. Maybe I could have taken the risk, and maybe he wouldn't have realized that he could just declare battle phase. Not entirely sure. But anyway, so he flips the Order, and then he like checks his graveyard, and I'm trying to bait him so I can call by the grave the Skeleton, and he says, and then I'm just like, do you have a Chain Link 3 perhaps? And then he's like, yeah, Skeleton target Dingirsu, so because the Order hasn't resolved yet, I'm allowed to call by the grave targeting Dingirsu. Just another thing that screws him up. So now he doesn't have that guy, and then the chain resolves entirely. Because I discarded a Spinny, I can trigger the effect of Gazelle, and then when I summon Gazelle, he Fog Blades, so you don't get the effect there. And then I go further and I summon the Spinny from grave, which triggers the Foul and Ham because the Salamangreat card was special summoned. I know that his face down is Fog Blade. We both know this. It's a card that he searched. It's the only card that he set. I think even the face down Fog Blade that he had set at the point was the one that he set off of Rusty, so we both knew it. So then I activate Foul targeting the Fog Blade. Now at this point, I kid you not, there's about 30 seconds left. So all the plays that you just saw, and obviously well, at the time, because I knew there wasn't that much time around, I was rushing to get through them, but all of those plays happened in a little over like 45 seconds. That was about as much time as it took. So it's 30 seconds at this point, and what I need him to do is just either, like, I mean, for lack of a better term, he needs to either shit or get off the pot. He needs to activate the Fog Blade because the Foul shuts it down, or he needs to not activate it. I don't really care. All that needs to happen is he needs to make a decision, which is something that he refused to do. So what happens at this point is he's sitting there, and it's hard to like show it because I mean it's just a recording, but he's flipping up the Fog Blade, he's putting it back down, he's flipping it up, he's putting it back down. It takes about 5 to 10 seconds, and then I say, like, out loud as he's doing that, please make a play. I know it's a Fog Blade, you're stalling for time. And he looks at the clock, which takes a couple seconds, he looks back to me, it takes a couple seconds, and then he spends about 5 to 7 seconds saying something like, I'm not stalling for time. Well, the problem is that in the time that I was telling him please make a play, and in the time that he took to look at the clock and then tell me he wasn't stalling for time, nothing is happening. He's not making a decision about the foul, and he never does. Time and round is called, and that's how I lose, and that's rough. And I was pretty angry. I try to keep my cool, but I was so clearly scumbagged out of the win that it's just really rough. Now, what you guys might not realize is that even if he used, so there's two options for him to Fog Blade, right? The first option is that he Fog Blades something on my side of the field, which doesn't matter. If he Fog Blades either of these guys, I just make Mirage Stelio, say battle phase. It'll take me like 2 seconds, and as long as I'm in battle phase when time around is called, I'm fine. But I can't summon an extra deck monster until he commits to either activating or not activating the Fog Blade. Alternatively, which the better play would have been, activating Fog Blade targeting his own Link 2 monster, because then I can't attack it. However, even if he does that, because I have two differently named cards, I can use both of them to summon Nightmare Phoenix, and because I have one card in hand, I can discard to pop the Fog Blade and then attack for 100 damage for game. So you see, in that situation, why it was so frustrating was because it didn't matter what he used the Fog Blade on, or if he used it or if he didn't use it. I just needed him to make a decision so I could continue playing my own combos. And I should mention, as my own mistake, I didn't call a judge in this situation, and I'll explain why, and also I'll explain why I'm wrong. The reason I didn't call a judge, and this has come up a few times since the new time rules, is that I thought judge calls weren't allowed to give time extensions unless the judge call was more than a couple minutes long. The problem is that when you only have 1 minute left on the clock, calling a judge because you think your opponent is slow playing intentionally or unintentionally means that by the time the judge comes over there, it's time and round, and now you don't get any of those seconds back. I was wrong here though, because after talking to a judge after the match happened, he explained that one of two things would probably happen if I called a judge. If it was ruled that my opponent was unintentionally slow playing, I would get that 1 minute or 45 seconds or however much time to actually continue playing my turn. They would also force him to make a decision on the fog blade activation. That's if it's unintentional. However, if it's intentional, then it's stalling for time, and then you look at a higher penalty, such as maybe a game loss or match loss, depending on the severity of the situation. So I want it to be made very clear that the reason that I'm doing this video isn't to put my opponent on blast, isn't to say that he was trying to cheat me out of a win, even though that's what it felt like from my perspective. The reason that I'm making this video is to protect you guys from having the same situation happen to you if it ever comes up. In the first situation, I should have escalated the situation even if it would have been complicated. No matter if it's just a he said versus she said situation, it's important for me to bring it up to a judge if I feel it isn't going the way that it actually should be going and I'm in the right. However, because I felt pressured, I didn't do that and it cost me game one. That's fine and dandy, I made that decision, but I feel like it was the wrong one. I didn't feel like I knew all the options available to me at the time. And then in the second situation, which was game 3, I definitely, absolutely should have called a judge, but I was very unaware that if I called a judge, he would give me that minute back, even if my opponent was unintentionally playing slow. I didn't know that. I probably lost at this point 3 different matches to a similar sort of scenario where there's 1 minute left on the clock and I don't feel like I can call a judge, but now I know for future reference, if my opponent is taking 30 seconds to figure out if he's going to activate a fog blade or not when the fog blade doesn't actually matter, I now know I can call over a judge, get those 30 seconds back, get that 1 minute back, whatever time I need or whatever time I feel my opponent has stolen from me, and I can actually win the match like I was supposed to if my opponent was playing at a proper pace. Anyway though, I just want to say one last thank you to the Konami judges that really helped talk me through the situation after the fact. They were extremely helpful to me, and I think going to other events I feel a lot more confident if this situation should ever happen again. I now know what to do, which is really helpful because this whole situation could have been avoided for the most part. Anyway though, hope you guys enjoyed this little story time. I don't really do this. I don't think it's important to do it in most cases, but in this case I felt like in these 2 very specific scenarios that both happened in this match that made me hate the match, not hate the player, but hate the actual match itself. I really just don't like to be in those situations, and because I learned that they were avoidable, I felt it was important to talk about in a video, so hopefully it doesn't happen to you guys. I'll see you later though. Thank you so much for watching. Goodbye.